"Open the door, Mr. Walker. Your wife is under arrest." The pounding rattled the front door so hard I thought the glass panes might explode. It was the kind of hit you hear right before a battering ram splinters the frame on some cop show. Except this wasn't TV. This was my porch. The sun had barely cleared the horizon. Soft light, cool air. Sarah and I had been up maybe 20 minutes. I was halfway through my first coffee, standing in the kitchen in an old flannel robe and socks when the knock came again, harder. "Daniel Walker," a voice barked, too loud for a quiet cul-de-sac. "Step outside. Now." I froze, mug in hand. Sarah came down the hall, tying back her dark hair. Her eyebrows lifted. "What now?" I set the cup on the counter and moved toward the front door. Through the narrow sidelight I caught dark shapes on the porch. For men, broad-shouldered, in tactical pants, black boots, and navy shirts with big block letters across the back in white. HOA Inspector. I squinted. The shirts had that cheap, shiny polyester look you get from novelty uniform sites. From a distance, in bad light, they might pass. If you were half asleep, or didn't know better, they were in a loose entry formation, 2 in front, 2 back. Sunglasses hid their eyes. The tallest rested a hand on a hip holster. I cracked the door to the length of the chain. "What's this about?" The tall one stepped forward, and my stomach dropped. Greg Morrison. My neighbor from across the street. We traded a lot of words over the last year. A few friendly, most not. But seeing him dressed like this was new. He wore wraparound shades despite the weak morning light, a dark ball cap tugged low, and that little half-smile that made you want to shut the door in his face. "Step aside, sir," Greg said, layering his voice with fake authority. "We have official reports of a code violation and a potential security breach. Your wife needs to come with us for questioning." I just stared. Questioning? By the HOA? His smirk widened. He tilted his head toward the men behind him. "Neighborhood safety isn't a joke, Mr. Walker. Get her out here. We can do this the easy way or the hard way." One of the inspectors shifted, clearly uncomfortable. Another glanced up the street, checking for an audience. Far off, I saw Mrs. Jenkins' curtains twitch. Footsteps sounded behind me. Sarah stepped into view, dark gray workout jacket with silver piping, fitted black pants, face calm. Greg straightened. "Ma'am, you're coming with us now. Do you have a warrant?" she asked, voice steady. He blinked. What? A search warrant? An arrest warrant? Any legal document at all?" Her tone stayed polite, edged with steel. "Or are you four just playing dress-up for fun this morning?" One of the men coughed into his fist, hiding a laugh. Another looked away, embarrassed. Greg's jaw clenched. "I don't need a piece of paper to keep this neighborhood safe." His fingers brushed the pistol at his belt. The holster was real. The gun, from what I could tell, was not standard issue. Sarah's posture shifted. Shoulders squared, spine straightened, expression going from casual to something I'd only seen in very tense moments. Greg had no idea what he'd walked into. "Daniel," she said, still watching him, "call the sheriff's office. Ask for the duty sergeant. Tell them we have 4 men impersonating officers on our porch." Greg's lips peeled back in something between a sneer and a snarl. "You're making a big mistake." "No, Greg," she said quietly. "The mistake is yours." For a heartbeat, the only sound was the low hum of someone's air conditioner. Then, somewhere down the block, a camera shutter clicked. Someone was taking pictures. I didn't know then that this was only the first domino. That the quiet life Sarah and I had tried to build here was about to be ripped open and dragged into something far worse than a neighborhood squabble. 2 years earlier, the idea of 4 fake cops pounding on our door would have sounded ridiculous. Back then, Sarah and I were chasing something simple. Quiet. We'd spent over a decade in San Diego proper. I was a civil engineer, long hours on big construction sites. Sarah, at least on paper, was a private security consultant. The title satisfied curiosity without explaining anything. Friends accepted it. Neighbors accepted it. And I didn't push. Not out loud. By our mid-40s, the city grind had worn us down. Noise, traffic, always in a rush. Oakwood Heights looked like the antidote. A planned community just far enough from the city to feel separate, close enough that my commute wouldn't murder me. Tree-lined streets, neat lawns, kids on bikes at dusk, people who waved from porches. The kind of place where front doors stayed unlocked. We bought a 2-story Craftsman at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. The backyard had room for Sarah's workout setup. The garage had space for my tools and workbench. Those first few weeks felt like a second honeymoon. We hosted a small cookout, met the next-door neighbors, started our ritual of walking the loop around the neighborhood at sunset. That's when we met Greg Morrison. Back then, he was the picture of a welcoming neighbor. Tall, fit, late 30s, clean-cut, quick smile. He told us he was a local police officer and the HOA's neighborhood safety chair. I wasn't sure that was a real position, but he sure wore it like one. At first, he was genuinely helpful. In our second week, he came over to help fix a leaking pipe in the garage, complimented Sarah's backyard layout, called her detail-oriented, invited us to a weekend barbecue and introduced us around as the model couple. If he was in uniform when we walked by, he'd wave from his driveway. His black and white cruiser parked out front made the street feel even safer. People said how lucky we were to have real law enforcement living there. For a while, Oakwood Heights was everything we wanted. Quiet, safe, predictable. The first crack showed up about a year after we moved in, when we decided to replace the fence. The old wooden boards were warped, splintered, and frankly ugly. We wanted something sturdier and more private. Sarah worked from home a lot, handling what I still thought were sensitive security calls. We checked the city codes, had the property line surveyed, pulled all the permits. Then we hired a contractor to install a 6-foot wrought iron fence. Perfectly legal. City code allowed fences up to 8 feet. The day work started, Greg changed. The waves stopped. The easy small talk vanished. He started standing in his front yard with his arms crossed, watching the crew. His wife Linda began hustling past us on dog walks, eyes fixed straight ahead. One evening he knocked on our door. Dark polo shirt, badge-shaped patch on the chest. Not a real uniform, but close enough to send a message. "Mike," he said. He always called me Mike, no matter how many times I corrected him. "Would you consider lowering that fence to 4 feet? It's blocking my view of the street from my kitchen window." I told him, as politely as I could, that we liked our privacy, especially with Sarah working from home. "I understand," he said, smile tightening. "But as a representative of the HOA, I think community harmony should come before individual preferences." It was the first time he'd used his HOA title like it gave him actual power. Up to then, I'd assumed neighborhood safety chair meant planning block parties and Halloween patrols. I shut the door and felt a small knot of unease stir in my gut. At the time, I told myself it was nothing, just an opinionated neighbor. Looking back, that was the moment the foundation shifted. The first hint that under Greg's helpful exterior was something harder, colder, and much more dangerous. It didn't take long for that knot to prove itself. Less than a week later, I found an envelope in our mailbox that made my stomach lurch. Heavy paper, embossed law firm letterhead, the kind of thing you don't ignore. Inside was a formal notice. Per the bylaws of the Oakwood Heights Homeowners Association, the fence currently under construction at your property is in violation of community aesthetic standards. Failure to comply with HOA directives will result in fines of $500 per day, effective 30 days from the date of this notice. I read it twice. The legalese squirmed across the page. Sarah was mid-workout in the backyard when I brought it to her. Dark athletic gear, hair pulled back, barely winded after a set of burpees. Her eyes flicked down the page once. "They can't do this," she said flatly. "We have permits. We're fully compliant with the city." She didn't sound defensive. She sounded sure, like she already knew every rule. Still, I wasn't going to charge at a law firm without checking. I called the number on the letterhead. The receptionist sounded puzzled. "I'm sorry, sir, but we have no record of your address, and we definitely haven't sent any notice about a fence." "So this is a forgery?" I asked. A pause. "If someone used our firm's name without authorization, That's a federal offense. Could you email us a copy? When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Anger, yes, but also a cold realization. This wasn't just Greg being petty. It was deliberate. That night at dinner, Sarah was quiet. Between bites, she stepped outside to take calls, speaking low. When I asked if it was work, she gave me a small, tight smile. Complicated, she said. Nothing I can talk about. Over the next week, the neighborhood's attitude toward us shifted. People who used to wave crossed the street. Mrs. Patterson, who'd once brought over cookies, suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. Then the notes started. Tucked under windshield wipers, taped to our mailbox, slipped in the front door. We'd appreciate it if you worked with the community for everyone's benefit. Maybe lower the fence and we can all get along. One was less polite. Outsiders don't understand how good neighborhoods operate. Different handwriting, different paper. Same message. Sarah noticed, of course. She noticed everything. She started spending more time outside on the phone, slipping into a vocabulary I didn't recognize. Not exactly military jargon, but precise, tactical language. And I started noticing things about her I'd always seen but never added up. How she chose the seat in any restaurant with a clear view of exits. How her movements were always economical. How she could size someone up in seconds. Greg, meanwhile, escalated. One Saturday, he hosted what he called an emergency HOA meeting on the sidewalk in front of our house. About 20 neighbors showed. Greg had a freshly printed sign propped against his folding chair. Neighborhood Security Chairman. He stood, gesturing toward our half-finished fence like it was taped off with crime scene ribbon. As you can see, he said loudly, the Walker family has refused to comply with community standards. This isn't just about aesthetics. A fence this high could conceal suspicious activity from street view. A few people nodded. Others shifted, unsure. Then he dropped his bomb. I've conducted a background investigation on our new neighbors. His eyes locked on the window where Sarah watched, arms crossed. Sarah Walker works at a classified facility. Her job description is marked confidential. For all we know, we could be living next to people who pose a threat to national security. A murmur rippled through the crowd. A few stepped back. I stood beside Sarah at the window, fists clenched. He can't do that. He can't just... Oh, he can, she said quietly. But he just made the biggest mistake of his life. Her voice was calm, but something in her eyes changed. It was the same shift I'd see again much later. The morning he showed up at 2 a.m. with his fake inspectors. Back then, I still had no idea who I'd married, or how prepared she was for what was coming. After that sidewalk spectacle, Oakwood Heights cooled fast. Not the weather, the atmosphere. When we first arrived, you couldn't walk the loop without half a dozen people waving or stopping to chat. Now, conversations died mid-sentence when we approached. Smiles dried up. I'd grown up in a small town. I knew how gossip worked when it took root. Greg wasn't just planting rumors, he was broadcasting them. One afternoon, I saw him in his driveway with Mr. Callahan from 3 doors down. Their conversation cut off the second I stepped out to get the mail. Greg clapped Callahan on the shoulder and said something low. Callahan gave me a stiff nod and walked away without a word. The friendly notes returned. Same tone, different paper. We'd appreciate it if you worked with the community. Maybe if you'd lower the fence. Sometimes they were almost pleading. Sometimes passive-aggressive. Always unsigned. Sarah collected each one in a Ziploc, labeled the bag, slid it into a cardboard box that was already half full. She never ranted about them, just filed them away. If the cold shoulders and notes were the soft tactics, what came next was the hard push. One Wednesday around 9 p.m., I heard voices outside. Not casual neighbor talk, the taut sound of people on a mission. Peeking through the blinds, I saw Greg with 2 men I didn't recognize, pointing at our house, gesturing along the side yard, nodding like they'd reached an agreement. The next evening, as we were cleaning up dinner, there was a sharp knock at the door. Not the door-shaking kind. Not yet, but firm. Greg stood there in the same dark polo with the fake badge patch. Arms crossed. Smile like thin plastic. Evening, Dan. He downgraded me from Mike. Just wanted to remind you about Saturday morning's neighborhood safety check. HOA protocol. We'll be doing inspections to make sure everyone's in compliance. I kept one hand on the door. Is that an actual HOA policy? Or something you made up? He tilted his head. I think you'll find it's in everyone's best interest to cooperate. Refusing inspection sends the wrong message. That night, Sarah and I sat in the living room with the TV low. She scrolled her phone, brow furrowed in concentration. He's escalating, she said finally. I noticed. Saturday isn't a safety check. It's an intimidation play. He's going to show up with his buddies and try to manufacture a violation. So what do we do? She looked up, eyes steady. We let him come. But I'll be ready. 2 days later, the inspection arrived early. It was 2 a.m. The power cut out first. Every light in the neighborhood blinked off at once, plunging the street into an unnatural, heavy darkness. Then came the crunch of boots on gravel. Low voices, the metallic click of a gate latch. Through the curtains, my first thought was SWAT. For figures in tactical pants and boots, navy shirts, black ball caps and earpieces. But the big white letters across their backs made me blink. HOA inspector. They even had clipboards, as if those made them official. It would have been comical if not for the fact 2 of them were visibly armed, and they were on my property at 2 in the morning. Greg led them, sweeping a flashlight across our windows. He stopped at the porch and hammered the door. Sarah was already at the top of the stairs, fully dressed, posture straight, alert, not surprised. Stay here, she said quietly. I'll handle it. It wasn't a suggestion. Greg's knock rolled through the house. 3 booming hits designed to wake every sleeping soul. HOA inspection, he shouted. Open up. Sarah didn't hurry. She walked to the door like she was walking into a meeting she'd prepped for days. Calm, measured steps. I followed a few paces back, heart pounding. She flipped on the porch light. The sudden brightness lit the 4 men in their navy shirts. 2 held clipboards. 1 gripped a mag light like a baton. Greg, front and center, rested his hand on the pistol at his hip. Sarah unlocked the deadbolt but only cracked the door. Can I help you, gentlemen? Greg's mouth slid into his practiced smirk. We've had reports of unusual activity on your property. HOA protocol requires an immediate inspection when there's a potential security issue. Sarah glanced at the letters on their backs, then at him. At 2 in the morning? Some things can't wait, he said. Now we can do this quick and easy or... Show me the paperwork, she cut in. He blinked. Paperwork. Whatever gives you authority to be on my property in the middle of the night. Search warrant. HOA inspection order. Anything with an actual signature. One of the men behind him shifted. Greg. Quiet, Greg snapped. He turned back to Sarah. I don't need to show you anything. I'm a law enforcement officer. This is my jurisdiction. Sarah tilted her head, almost curious. Your jurisdiction. That's right. He puffed himself up. I've kept this neighborhood safe long before you moved in. I don't need some. She opened the door a little wider, stepping into the threshold. The porch light flashed off a small silver badge-shaped pin on her jacket collar. You're on my property at 2 a.m. without a warrant, she said. Impersonating an officer. Armed. That's a long list of problems for you, Greg. His eyes flicked to the pin, then back to her face. Don't try to intimidate me. I'm not trying, she said evenly. This is me being polite. They held each other's stare. The men behind him shrank a little. One studied his boots. Another glanced toward the street, already calculating an exit. Step aside, Sarah, Greg said. I need to make sure there's nothing dangerous in there. Her voice dropped into a low, controlled register I'd only heard once or twice before. Greg, if you cross this threshold, you'll be trespassing. And you'll leave here in the back of a real police cruiser. His jaw worked. I could see the calculation in his eyes, call her bluff, push forward or not. Silence stretched tight. Daniel, Sarah said, still not looking away from him. Call the sheriff's office. Tell them we have armed individuals impersonating inspectors at our front door. Ask for the duty sergeant. Color flooded Greg's face in the porch light. You're making a mistake, Sarah. No, she said. The mistake is yours. And you're running out of time to walk away. For a second I thought he'd do something truly stupid. His hand twitched near his holster. But the man with the flashlight leaned in and murmured something. Slowly, Greg stepped back. This isn't over, he spat, pointing at her. Not by a long shot. She didn't flinch. You're right. It's not over. Next time you show up here, you'd better bring actual law. They melted into the darkness at the end of the street. 5 minutes later, the power came back. I locked the door and turned to Sarah. She was still watching the window until their shapes disappeared completely. Who exactly are you? I asked. She didn't answer. Not then. But I knew the answer was coming. And when it did, nothing about our quiet suburban life was going to look the same. The house was quiet again, but not in the easy way it used to be. This quiet felt heavy, like the walls were listening. Sarah stood at the window a moment longer, then turned and walked to the kitchen. We should talk, she said. I followed, my mind replaying every second of what had just happened. Cheap uniforms, real guns, Greg's smug face. What the hell was that? I asked louder than I meant to. She didn't react. She filled a kettle, set it on the burner, turned on the gas. Only when the flame caught did she speak. You've been asking yourself questions about me for a while, haven't you? Caught me off guard. What does that have to do with Greg showing up here in the middle of the night? Everything, she said. The kettle started a low rumble. Steam curled up. She braced her hands on the counter and looked straight at me. My name is Sarah Walker. I'm the elected sheriff of this county. I just stared. Sheriff, I repeated, like maybe I'd misheard. Yes, 15 years in law enforcement. 10 in the sheriff's office. Elected last year. She let it settle. I didn't tell you because I wanted us to have a normal life here. But after tonight, normal's gone. The kettle whistled softly. I barely heard it. I thought you were in private security, I said. That's what I let people think, she replied. When you hold this job, you make enemies. People with resources and grudges. Sometimes it's safer if they don't know where you live or who you love. I leaned against the wall, trying to absorb it. So Greg is dangerous, she cut in. He's not just a nosy neighbor. He's impersonating law enforcement. That's a felony. Tonight's stunt was armed trespass. If I'd wanted to, I could have had all 4 of them face down in the grass in zip ties before the lights came back on. She said it like a fact, not a threat. Why didn't you? Because I wanted to see his next move. Now I know he's willing to escalate. She poured hot water into 2 mugs, slid one to me, then reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. And because I had this running the whole time, every word he said is on here. It hit me then. She hadn't just reacted. She'd been prepared. What's his deal? I asked. What's he really after? She leaned back, cradling her mug. I don't know yet, but people like him don't pull stunts like this over a fence. There's something bigger at work. She gave a small, dangerous smile. And now he's my case. For the first time that night, I felt something other than fear. Greg had no idea who he'd picked a fight with. Tomorrow, she said, setting her cup down, I start digging. Greg Morrison's about to wish he'd never heard my name. By the time I came downstairs the next morning, Sarah was already at the dining table. Laptop open, notepad beside it, coffee forgotten at her elbow. The look on her face reminded me of structural plans spread out before a big build, every line intentional. Morning, I said, still groggy. You're up early. Greg Morrison doesn't exist. She didn't look up. That woke me up faster than caffeine. What do you mean? I mean there's no sworn officer by that name in this county. She turned the screen toward me. Or in this state. And he's not a licensed security guard either. The state licensing database returned nothing. So who is he? That's what I'm finding out, she said, switching to a restricted law enforcement database. We run background checks on new hires. I'm running one on him. The trick is figuring out his real name. It didn't take long. Property records showed the deed for Greg's house was under a Gregory Mitchell, not Morrison. When she entered that, the hits came fast. 3 prior arrests, she read. 2 in Arizona for impersonating a police officer. 1 in Nevada for harassment. Fired from 3 private security firms for abuse of authority. Civil suits in both states, intimidation, false reports, stalking. I stared at the list. And now he lives here. He's been moving state to state for years, she said. Starts friendly, builds trust, then uses it to gain influence. In some places, he's taken over the HOA. My stomach sank. So this isn't about our fence. No, her voice hardened. This is about control. And probably money. She pulled up another tab, corporate filings. He's linked to at least 2 shell companies in Nevada. Both list the same mailing address as a man named Victor Hale. Who's that? Real estate investor. Used to be under investigation for property scams targeting military families. Her jaw tightened. He'd find homeowners in financial stress, push them to sell below market, then flip the property. And you think Greg's working for him? I think Greg's the muscle, she said. Intimidation, manufactured violations, turning neighbors against a target so Hale can swoop in and help by buying them out. She closed the laptop for a moment. So no, we're not just dealing with a fake cop. This is an organized scheme. What now? I asked. Now we collect evidence. She pulled a small black device from a drawer, about the size of a deck of cards. 3 of these, 2 outside, 1 inside near the front door. Motion activated, night vision, audio. You just had those lying around? She gave me a look that said, you know the answer. By mid-afternoon, the cameras were up. 1 was tucked into the branches of our front maple, angled toward the street. Another hid under the eaves above the garage. The 3rd watched the entryway from inside. That evening she laid out the plan. We let Greg think he's winning. We don't react to the petty stuff. When he overreaches, and he will, we catch it. Her voice was calm, but there was something beneath it. Cold determination, maybe a hint of anticipation. Greg Mitchell, Morrison, whatever he called himself, had picked the wrong house. Sarah always said people like Greg can't resist 2 things. Attention and opportunity. Give them just enough of both, and they'll show you exactly who they are. The morning after she uncovered his real name, she started spinning what she called the net. Step 1 was the HOA's private group chat. The one Greg had insisted every resident join for security updates. Sarah rarely used it. That day she posted, "Heads up, everyone. We've been asked to temporarily store some equipment for a county training exercise. Nothing to worry about, but the delivery truck may come late at night. Please don't be alarmed if you see activity in our driveway. No details, just enough to sound official." By afternoon, the bait had been nibbled. Someone, almost certainly Greg, screenshotted her message and forwarded it around. Within hours, our garage camera pinged. Greg pacing the sidewalk across the street, phone to his ear, eyes fixed on our house. That night, she turned it up a notch. Using her sheriff's credentials, she drafted a fake training inventory list. Non-sensitive jargon, but detailed enough to sound real. Then she left it open on her laptop and angled the blinds so the screen was visible from the street. "Isn't that a little theatrical?" I asked. "Exactly," she said, smiling faintly. "Theatrical works on people who need a story to justify their actions." By dawn, the camera in the maple caught Greg standing on our lawn, aiming his phone through the window, snapping photos of the laptop screen. Sarah downloaded the footage, labeled it, filed it. "Step 1 complete," she said. Step 2 started that evening. She logged into a secure channel and called someone she introduced only as Rodriguez. Later I learned he was a retired FBI agent she'd worked with. "Your guy's still active," Rodriguez said through the speaker. "Name's Victor Hale. Been moving property through straw buyers for years. Mitchell, your neighbor, is one of his enforcers." "Enough to charge?" Sarah asked, pen scratching across her notepad. "Not yet," Rodriguez said. But if we can tie his fake cop routine and intimidation to Hale's companies, we can bring federal charges. You get me that bridge, and we're in business. After the call, Sarah tapped her pen on the table. We're going to give him something he thinks he can use, she said. Then we watch where it goes. Over the next 2 days, she built the rest of the trap. She wrote a fake memo on county letterhead, addressed to Sheriff Sarah Walker from the non-existent County Tactical Training Division. It mentioned a high-value asset relocation, with wording vague enough to be bait and specific enough to sound real. She printed it and left it in our unlocked mailbox. By nightfall, it was gone. The next morning, the garage camera caught Greg meeting a man in a silver SUV I didn't recognize. They stood by the driver's door, passing the memo back and forth, pointing at our house. Sarah watched the video twice, then zoomed in on the plate. That's Hale's car, she said. He's here. That evening she added more pressure. In the HOA chat she posted, reminder, due to the upcoming training equipment delivery, please keep driveways clear. Arrival time is classified, but it will be within the next 72 hours. Within 20 minutes, another camera picked up Greg pacing his driveway, phone pressed to his ear. You sure it's worth something? He said. Pause. All right, I'll take care of it. We'll get them out before the delivery date. Sarah muted the clip and looked at me. She'd gotten exactly what she wanted. At dinner, I finally asked what had been chewing at me. What if this blows back on us? What if they figure out you're baiting them? She set her fork down. Then we moved to step 3. What's step 3? Her lips curved into a small, cold smile. Public exposure. The kind you don't walk away from. I didn't ask for specifics. Part of me didn't want to know. But I could feel it, the tide was turning. Greg thought he was building a case against us. Every move he made was actually giving Sarah more rope to hang him with. People like Greg love an audience. Sarah told me that Friday morning over coffee. He's going to call a public meeting. It's how guys like him cement control. Get everyone in one place, spin the narrative, force a choice. That afternoon, a flyer showed up in our mailbox. Emergency HOA gathering Saturday, 4 p.m. Community dispute resolution attendance strongly encouraged. It's bait. I said. It's an opportunity, she corrected. He thinks he's setting the stage for my humiliation. Instead, it'll be his. Saturday was hot and bright, the kind of afternoon that made the asphalt shimmer. By 3:50 p.m., folding chairs formed a semicircle on the strip of grass in front of our house. Nearly 30 neighbors turned out, more than I'd ever seen at any HOA event. Greg arrived with his usual swagger. Crisp navy polo, fake badge clipped to his chest, aviator sunglasses. 2 of his inspectors flanked him, clipboards in hand like subpoenas. Thank you all for coming, he began, voice pitched to Carrie. We're here because certain residents have refused to comply with community standards. This isn't personal. It's about protecting the safety and appearance of Oakwood Heights. He turned toward our 6-foot fence like it was Exhibit A. Look at this. Iron bars 6 feet high. It blocks sight lines, creates blind spots. In my professional opinion, it's a security hazard. Murmurs fluttered through the crowd. And that's not all. He stepped closer to the center. My investigation has revealed that Mrs. Sarah Walker is engaged in activities that raise serious concerns for national security. That's when Sarah stepped forward. Black blazer over a simple blouse. Hair pulled back neat. No badge showing, no gun visible. Just a steady, contained presence that immediately changed the air. Greg, she said, cutting into his monologue. Before you go any further, I have a simple request. He blinked behind his glasses. What's that? Show us your police identification number. The crowd shifted, small sounds of discomfort. He let out a short laugh. That's sensitive information. I can't just hand it out in public. Every sworn officer in this county has a badge number, Sarah said. It's public record. Providing it is routine. His jaw tightened. Like I said, I'm not obligated. Sarah turned to a folding table where she'd set up her laptop and a small projector. With a few clicks, The portable screen behind her lit up with an official county roster of active law enforcement officers. She scrolled, slow and deliberate, to the M's. "This," she said, "is the list of every officer currently serving in our county. As you can see, there is no Greg Morrison." The murmurs grew louder. She clicked again, bringing up a receipt. "Here's an order for a replica police badge purchased from an online costume supplier, shipped to 742 Elmwood Drive, Greg's address, 8 months ago." Greg flushed. "That's fabricated." Sarah's voice stayed level. "Is this fabricated too?" The screen switched to a still from our garage camera. Greg, 5:37 a.m., leaning against our window with his phone out, taking photos of her stage training inventory. Gasps rippled through the chairs. "And this," she played a short audio clip. Greg's voice, captured from the front yard mic. "We'll get them out before the delivery date." "He's twisting things," Greg shouted. "You people don't understand." "What we understand," Sarah said, her tone finally sharpening, "is that you've been impersonating an officer, trespassing on private property, and working with a known real estate fraudster to target military families in this neighborhood." The crowd erupted into overlapping questions. Greg's inspectors suddenly looked like they wanted to disappear. Greg jabbed a finger at her. "You think you can make a fool of me? You have no idea who you're dealing with." "No, Greg," she said. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." The space between them crackled. I saw his hands start to shake. Not with fear, with anger. "Don't listen to her," he barked at the neighbors. "She's the threat here. To all of you. I've seen her file. I know what she's capable of." "Greg," Sarah said, "you need to stop talking." He didn't. His words came faster, harsher. "You think you're safe with her? She's trained to kill. When she turns, she'll—" The movement was fast, but I saw it. His hand dropped to his belt, fingers closing around the pistol grip. Several people gasped. A woman screamed. Chairs scraped back. "Gun!" someone shouted. Time stretched thin. Greg drew both hands on the weapon and leveled it at Sarah. "Everybody shut up," he yelled. "Listen to me." Sarah didn't move. Not backward, not sideways. Hands visible at her sides. Voice low and somehow cutting through his shout. "Greg, you just made the worst mistake of your life." It wasn't bravado. It was a verdict. She took one measured step forward. "You're pointing a loaded firearm at an elected law enforcement officer in front of 30 witnesses," she said. "And on camera." She nodded toward the phones raised in the air, neighbors already streaming. Greg's eyes darted, seeing the lenses. "They don't know what's real." "They know enough," she said. "You're out of time." What happened next was so fast my brain barely tracked it. 1 second, the gun was centered on her chest. The next, she moved sharp and efficient. She slid sideways, stepped inside his line, her left hand snapping down on his wrist while her right clamped the barrel and shoved it skyward. The shot cracked like lightning. I smelled burned powder, felt the concussion in my ribs. Before anyone could scream again, she twisted the weapon from his hand, stepped behind him, and wrenched his arm into a lock that drove him to his knees. In another heartbeat, he was face down on the grass, Sarah's knee between his shoulder blades, his wrists cinched behind him with a black zip tie she'd pulled from her blazer pocket. Less than 3 seconds. Greg Mitchell, self-appointed neighborhood enforcer, was pinned in his own staged theater. Silence fell, broken only by ragged breathing. Sarah's voice rang out, clear and official. "Greg Mitchell, you're under arrest for impersonating a police officer, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Someone started clapping, tentative at first, then stronger until it rolled through the crowd. Greg thrashed against the hold, face red, spitting curses. "You think this is over? You have no idea how deep this goes." Sarah didn't respond. Her eyes were scanning the edges of the crowd. That's when I noticed. 2 of his inspectors were gone. They'd slipped away in the chaos. "Daniel," she called, still kneeling on Greg. "Call the sheriff's office. I've got 1 in custody. 2 at large, likely armed." My phone was already in my hand. Within minutes, sirens wailed in the distance. Deputies pulled up hard, doors flying open, weapons drawn, until Sarah identified herself and passed over Greg's gun. Detective Maria Santos, a compact woman with sharp eyes, took one look at Sarah, then at Greg on the ground. "He's been on our radar," she said. "You just handed us the probable cause we needed." They hauled Greg to his feet, wrists still bound, and marched him to a patrol car. He didn't fight now, just muttered, eyes fixed on Sarah like he could burn a hole through her. Before they shoved him inside, he twisted his head toward her. "You were targeted long before you moved here," he said. "When they send someone else, it won't be me you're dealing with." Sarah's face didn't change, but I saw something harden in her eyes. The cruisers pulled away. Neighbors who'd avoided us for weeks came forward, thanking her, shaking her hand. She didn't bask in it. "It's not over," she told them. "Not until we know who they are." She wasn't just talking to them. She was talking to me. The deputies had barely cleared the corner when Sarah's phone buzzed. She stepped aside, voice dropping. "In custody. No, two still at large. Confirm vehicle description." When she came back, her expression was that controlled blank I'd come to recognize. She was already 10 moves ahead. "That was Rodriguez," she said. "He's sending a joint task force tomorrow. Greg's not a lone wolf. He's part of something bigger they've been trying to nail for months." I thought of Greg's parting words. So he wasn't lying about us being targeted. Not this time. She gathered the scattered printouts from earlier in the week. If this was just about the fence, he wouldn't have pushed so hard. Somebody wanted us gone. That night she spread documents across the dining room table. Property records, court filings, corporate registrations. Half I recognized. Half were new. She'd drawn a flowchart in clean, precise lines. "This is how it works," she said. She tapped the first box. "Mitchell identifies a target family, usually military or law enforcement. Stable, disciplined, own property in an area Hale wants." An arrow led to the next box. "He builds a case against them, real or fabricated. Fines, threats, code violations. Uses fake authority to crank up the pressure." Another arrow. "Eventually they sell. Hale steps in, buys the house through a shell company, flips it for a big profit. Then they repeat in a new neighborhood." "How many times?" I asked. "We have confirmed cases on at least 40 families in 6 states. She said. "Probably more." "Why military families?" "They're used to following rules and keeping their mouths shut," she said. "Less likely to go public. More likely to move quietly. And some have security clearances. Push enough of them out of certain areas and you change who lives near key facilities." A chill ran up my spine. "So this isn't just about money." "No," she said. "It's about influence." By morning, the task force had arrived. Captain Rodriguez was tall, broad-shouldered, silver at the temples. His easy grin barely softening the seriousness in his eyes. "Sarah," he said, shaking her hand like they'd already been through fires together. "You just made my month. We've chased Mitchell across state lines for 3 years." He turned to me. "And you, thanks for the footage. That mailbox video is gold." I glanced at Sarah. "Bait," I said. She gave the smallest nod. The next 48 hours blurred. Search warrants hit Greg's house and 2 nearby properties tied to Hale's companies. I watched agents carry out bankers' boxes, hard drives, even a duffel bag stuffed with fake gear, badges, patches, plastic IDs. A detective showed Sarah a tablet from Greg's office. It was full of notes on targets, habits, income, kids' schools. "This isn't intimidation," Sarah said. "It's intelligence gathering." The 2 missing inspectors were picked up in a neighboring county. Both were ex-security contractors with minor records. Enough baggage to be useful, not enough to trip alarms when they moved in somewhere new. Confronted with evidence, they flipped fast, pointing straight at Hale as the organizer. He was arrested 2 days later in Nevada, stepping off a private jet. By the end of the week, the story broke wide. Local media first, then national. Reporters camped at the end of our block. Someone branded it the HOA sting. Everyone wanted a quote. Neighbors wanted reassurance. The sheriff's office wanted Sarah at the podium. She gave one statement. No title or uniform, real or fake, gives anyone the right to intimidate a community for personal gain. If something feels wrong, speak up. That's how you keep a neighborhood safe. It wasn't glamorous or loud, but it landed. That night, when the house finally went quiet, I asked, "So, is it over?" She poured 2 glasses of water and slid one to me. The operation? Yeah. The investigation'll take months, but Mitchell and Hale won't see the outside of a cell for a long time. And the other thing? I asked. She looked up. What other thing? Where Greg said we were targeted before we ever moved in. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was softer. That's what keeps me up, she said. If this were just a random neighborhood, they wouldn't have pushed this hard. Somebody picked us specifically. I thought about asking who she suspected. From her face, I could tell either she didn't know yet, or she had an idea she wasn't ready to share. 6 weeks after Greg Mitchell rode away in handcuffs, Oakwood Heights felt like a different place. The low-grade tension that had hung in the air for months was gone. People waved again. Chats sprang back up at mailboxes. Kids rode their bikes without parents watching the street like a firing line. The HOA board, newly reconstituted, met at the community center instead of on sidewalks. They rotated leadership, posted financials openly, and added one ironclad rule. No one could hold any position with the word security in it without real law enforcement credentials they were willing to verify publicly. It wasn't just a rule. It was a scar turned into armor. Despite multiple nominations, Sarah refused a leadership role. Real leadership is about empowering people, she told the crowd at the first reformed HOA meeting, not holding power over them. The line got a standing ovation. Later, it showed up on the flyers for our first Unity Day barbecue. She did agree to run a monthly community safety class. The first session drew 20 people. The second, 40. By the third month, they moved it to the high school gym. It wasn't all self-defense. She taught people how to read a situation, how to spot fake authority, how to document suspicious behavior in ways law enforcement could actually use. Don't be paranoid, she told them, but don't be passive. The kids adored her. At Unity Day, they clustered around like she was some kind of superhero in jeans and a ball cap. One little boy begged her to show him the move where you bend the bad guy's arm backwards. She laughed and promised a safer version, but only after he demonstrated the call for help script she taught them. Shout loud, name the threat, describe it. Watching her work the crowd, I realized something. Greg had chosen the wrong target, but the right neighbor. She hadn't just dismantled his scheme. She'd fortified the whole community. One evening, sitting on the porch with mugs of tea, looking out over our still-standing 6-foot fence, I asked, "Do you ever regret letting them see who you really are?" She thought about it, watching the kids at the playground. "There are times when secrets keep you safe," she said, "and times when the truth is the safest thing you can give people." Her gaze drifted to the new slide, where a bronze plaque was bolted to the side, bought with funds recovered from Greg's property flips. In honor of those who stand up for truth and protect the place we call home, life began to settle. Almost. There were reminders that the larger fight wasn't over. Like the postcard that arrived one afternoon. No return address. A picture on the front of a quiet suburban street in Virginia. On the back, one line, "You stopped one of them. There are more." Sarah didn't tell the neighbors. She slipped it into a folder in her locked desk and called Rodriguez on a secure line. Or the night I woke at 2 a.m. and found her in the darkened kitchen, lit only by her laptop screen, scrolling through a spreadsheet of names and addresses I didn't recognize. "Just keeping track," she said when I asked. The faint smile didn't reach her eyes. For most people on our block, the story had an ending, and a happy one. We had our peace back. The fence that started it all was just part of the scenery now. The HOA worked for the residents, not against them. Neighbors who'd barely known each other before now shared pies, swapped holiday lights, traded pet-sitting favors. It was almost normal. Almost. One cool Saturday in early fall, I was planting bulbs along the front walk when a white van rolled by slowly. Nothing unusual there. Delivery vans were constant. But the driver's gaze lingered on our house a beat too long. Sarah, standing in the doorway, noticed. She didn't wave, didn't scowl, just watched until the van turned the corner, then stepped back inside and locked the door. Something? I asked when I came in, brushing dirt off my hands. Probably nothing, she said. Then, after a beat, I'll keep an eye on it. That was life with Sarah. Even when the street felt calm, she knew silence could just be the moment before the next storm. The next HOA meeting was in 2 days. She sat on the oversight committee now. I knew she'd be there, near the back, listening, scanning, making sure nobody ever again got the chance to wear a fake badge in Oakwood Heights. Because Sarah Walker, the woman Greg Mitchell thought he could bully into submission, wasn't just my wife. She was the sheriff of this county. And over the past months I'd learned something. When she decides to defend her people, she doesn't just win. She changes the battlefield. Which is why, as the neighborhood finally settled into a new kind of quiet, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the beginning of something bigger.